see him in just a second. His name is Chris Mellon. He was a Deputy Director of Defense during the Clinton years. He's been a champion of this topic for the last few years, and he helped really kind of engineer this whole thing. And part of this was working with Lou Elizondo and having him come out, getting all this information out into the media, and getting an official organization in the Pentagon to admit that they take UAP seriously and they have cases. So when the Navy did that, that allowed Chris Mellon to go to the Congress, which was his responsibility to brief the Congress on special access programs, commonly known as BAC projects, to say, look, have you guys been briefed on UAP and these cases the Navy's talking about? They're like, no. And he's like, well, don't you think you should be briefed on this? And they said, yes. So that's when these briefings started and went on for a period of time. And you'll notice, and I'll show you some videos in just a second, every congressperson who's been briefed behind closed doors has come out saying, this is a very serious topic that we need to take seriously and we need to investigate right now. And you'll notice, if you start paying attention or start looking at the articles, people like Marco Rubio, Kirsten Gillibrand, so people on both sides of the aisle are using some very strong wording and saying, we want you to investigate. We're not going to stop until you do. This is a very serious issue that you need to do something about. And they're not stopping. And there is this tug and pull right now with the Pentagon and with Congress over what to do on this. The latest organization being Arrow. We'll look at that in just a second. But yeah, this is kind of what we're hearing now. So it'll start with Lou Elizondo, who is an intelligence agent, who is kind of the whistleblower, retired and come out.
The government has already stated for the record that they're real. I'm not telling you that. The United States government is telling me that.
There's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory. They did not have an easily explainable pattern.
Frankly, there are a lot more sightings than have been made public. So we're talking about objects that, frankly, engage in actions that are difficult to explain, that movements that are hard to replicate, that we don't have the technology for.
Well, we have things flying over military installations, over military exercises, and other places, and we don't know what it is. It isn't ours. It isn't anything that's registered with the FAA, and in many cases exhibits attributes of things we've never seen, technology, the kinds of technology we haven't seen before, or at least that's what it seems like.
So it's not us. That's one thing we know. We know that. I could say that with a very high degree of confidence, in part because of the positions I held in the department, and I know the process.
Well, I don't believe they're coming from foreign adversaries. If they were, why, that would suggest that they have a technology which is in a whole different sphere than anything we understand. And frankly, China and Russia just aren't there. And neither are we, by the way.
My personal, I can't speak on behalf of the government. Obviously, I'm not in the U.S. government anymore. My personal belief is that there is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone, whatever that means.
So you know, it's across the board. Everybody's very, very concerned about the issue now and wanting to take it seriously, even if kind of, you know, coverage kind of waxes and wanes. Behind the scenes still, you know, they're very adamant about something being done. In fact, we're supposed to hear from NASA on May 31st. They're holding a kind of town hall where they're going to be talking about this. And then soon after, they'll be releasing a report because they've had an organization looking into this and what they should do about it. So we'll be hearing what their plans will be, hopefully. And I believe that they're going to actually do something about it because luckily, you know, the scientific community in this area is not that big. And we're hearing some positive things. And some of those members of that organization are interacting with us and reading the papers and very curious. Right now, we have the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is called ARROW. It's ran by a gentleman named Sean Kirkpatrick, who is a physicist, a doctor of physics, but he's also worked in intelligence. You know, what he said most recently is his idea is that the military will look into foreign tech. And that's where this stuff goes, you know, foreign technology. We don't know who it is, so we try to find it, we try to get it, we try to figure out what it is, back engineer it to know who's, you know, what the Chinese and the Russians are up to. But his goal, ultimately, he says, is turning UAP into SCP, someone else's problem. But what he means by that is then he believes NASA should take over that role of investigating anything that they can identify as something that is ours or another foreign actor. So hopefully we'll hear from NASA saying, sure, we'll take that on, and that something will be done. I think that's very important because the difficulty with foreign intelligence is that it's very highly, this is the stuff of spies. This is the spycraft, you know, exchanging. We know what you know, and you know that we know, you know, kind of stuff, hiding. We don't want them to know what we know. And we also want to engineer what they think they know. So that's what makes it really difficult and why there's so much secrecy around all of this. And even the New York Times has said that it's kind of helpful when people think that stuff that is ours, or even stuff that is theirs, is something that is unidentified, because then they don't have to address, you know, who knows what and what knows who, and it doesn't mess up their spy work. So I mean, it's a very sensitive area, and that's why military, and we've heard this from some of the military, has said, we're not really going to release anything that we find out about this stuff, because it's classified, and it's very sensitive material. So, but Congress isn't happy with that. Congress wants them to do something. Kirkpatrick's idea is to pass this along to NASA. But he also talked about this, which is of course something that we know in the scientific community, and this kind of gets to Enigma and what we're doing and what this is all about. Scientists need data. That's how you figure something out. As frustrating as it may be for some of the people who follow this field and hear from some of these pilots and some of this anecdotal information doesn't prove anything. It points us in the right direction, shows us where to look. But we need data. We need science is where we make, you know, this is where we figure out what's really going on. But this sort of work is tough. The SCU, the organization I'm involved with, did an analysis. The only analysis out there, the only report out there, except for that leaked document, on what happened at the Nimitz incident and what sort of physics it would take for what they observed. And for instance, you'd be looking at G-forces that are super high in the 20s and 30s, and aircraft will fall apart. Well, someone will pass out at about 8 Gs. Aircraft will fall apart from 8 to 10 Gs. But these are, you know, much larger G-forces than that. Beyond that, in order to even travel at these G-forces, it takes immense amounts of energy. And we see that energy in propulsion emitted typically via heat signatures, but we're not seeing those heat signatures in the FLIR videos. So what's going on? We need data for that. And there's two types of data that you get. Telemetry, radar data, FLIR data, video data, weather, other types of data that the military is able to get with their very expensive equipment, and that's what they do, using this equipment to observe, you know, especially objects or aircraft that they don't know whose it is that's, you know, flying in airspace that's secure. But scientists don't have access to that data. The military has access to that data. So that's why we see people like the Galileo Project filling the rooftop of one of the buildings in Harvard with all kinds of cameras and equipment to gather information. But of course, what's the likelihood of an object flying over Harvard? Pretty low. So you need to do more than that. The other type of data, which just speaks to the difficulty, but the other type of data is sighting reports, What are people seeing? It's anecdotal, you're not going to do science to determine exactly what it is, but you are going to be able to look at trends, you're going to be able to look at shapes, sizes, maybe even do some intelligence type of work where you can try to figure out motivations such as, are there more sightings over nuclear facilities? Like many researchers believe, you know, once we detonated our first bomb, was that the trigger when stuff started coming in? At least at the SCU, we've done some preliminary work to show that not all nuclear facilities necessarily have a statistically higher amount of sightings. However, nuclear development, especially during the 50s and the 40s, when our nukes were first being built, had a very significantly high amount of sightings during those periods of time. So was whatever the nature of this, looking at that, that's the sort of data that sightings can do. And then beyond that, if there are hot spots, periods of times and places where they're seeing more, it can tell scientists to go put their equipment so they can start to capture this stuff.